I'll just disconnect my internet for a second to see if that helps. Ooh, that is one hot dongle.
You, my friend, have some questions to answer.
And I look forward to doing so.
Someone in the Reddit asked you what Dan Tom Kia was in regards to wedginess, and you copped out, and I won't let you do it. So, here and now, we're going to establish whether or not Dan Tom Kia is a wedge.
First things first, broad strokes, I stand by my original response. Dan Tom Kia, in the system that I've got going, comes in as a wedge flipper. And I don't think anyone can argue with that. Now, it kind of brings up the question of how you define a wedge more generally, because we've got two things going on. We've got the kind of pontoon sides, and we've got the fact that it's kind of lower in the centre. So I'm going to kind of invoke the Dominator 2 clause of invisible plane, which I believe still makes it a wedge. But that is something that is more a question of, my gut feeling is that it's a wedge, so I need to make my definition fit that, rather than having a really solid definition and applying it fairly to Dan Tom Kia.
Yeah. See, I think Dan Tom Kia has wedges, but I think it's sort of like overall is not a wedge. I think those two sort of protrusions out the front remove its wedginess for me. But like if you ignore those and just look in the middle bit, although it's quite steep, I think that just about qualifies as a wedge.
Can a robot have multiple wedges on the same sort of side, as it were? Or at that point, do they have to be wedgelets?
I don't know.
Because a front and rear wedge seems fair, but two wedges on the same side? Surely they've got to be wedgelets at that point.
I reckon you could do it, right? I reckon if you have a robot that's like wide and then wide and then on the front of it is just straight, so there's no like weird fork bits coming out the front of it, and then you just have two different angles. On the left side it's at 45 and the right side it's at 30. That would be two wedges on the front, I think. It wouldn't be in any way effective for combat robotics, but I think that would qualify as two wedges on the front.
Or is that some weird, like, compound wedge?
Well, I think that would be two. And I don't know, it's sort of like hard with, like, the front of Lucky, for example, as well. Is that two wedges or is that wedgelets?
Well, it depends what setup they're running. They have a full wedge, they have two wedgelets. Or, as they had last season, they quite like to have one wedgelet, because symmetry just didn't matter to them.
But, like, if you imagine, like, the sort of, like, the two wedgelet version of Lucky, I think Lucky's interesting because they're sort of, like, floppy. If you imagine sort of like that, almost like, I guess like the shape of Dan Tom Kia, but without the front protrusions being like the triangular prisms, if they were two proper wedge, like traditional doorstop wedges sticking out the front. I guess that gets into the world of forks, doesn't it?
Not necessarily.
Depending on how they do that.
I mean, forks are about shape in particular. You know, forks are kind of basically flat things at the end of the day, or sort of T-section style things. Whereas a wedge kind of has some very well-defined faces. To me, that's kind of the difference there. Although when you look at Minotaur, they have kind of forks as well that they sometimes use. I've forgotten the original question. I'm just now bouncing all this around inside my head like a fast-forward game of Pong.
I think we've answered the original question about what Dan Tom Kia is. I think not a wedge for me, and then kind of a wedge, but you can't justify it for you.
Oh, I can justify it. I can double down on it. I mean, this wedge debate, it's so much more complicated than the drum debate. The drum debate is easy. You know, it's just that my way is right. Whereas with this, it takes a lot more classifying. And eventually, over the course of weeks, months and years, we might get a definition. Eventually.
One day.
It won't be one that we agree on, though.
That would take until the heat death of the universe, I think. So, the slow but steady march on towards completely buttonless phones is continuing. I happened to come across a review on Android Police of the HTC U12 Plus, which is completely buttonless. It doesn't have any normal buttons on there. All the volume area and the power stuff are kind of like pressure sensitive areas on the side. If you've ever used like one of the more modern Kindles, you'll be familiar with it, or the home button on the iPhone 7 and 8 are like this as well. HTC are not the only company doing it. Apple will soon follow, I'm sure. That's their intent, to get rid of all buttons. I wonder if you have any thoughts. As you might expect, I have thoughts on buttonless phones. Do you have any feelings on buttonless phones?
I'm afraid there's something we need to do first. We
Oh,
need
God.
to define what constitutes a button, because these pressure things that you're talking about, to me, are a button. Because they are tactile. You can feel where they are on the phone. A touchscreen, You know, every single part of that screen can be doing a different thing in different situations. You need to be able to see it to work out what you're pressing on. For me, a button on a phone is something I can reach in my pocket and press without looking. You know, on my phone, I know where the unlock button is. I can find it with my thumb easily and get it unlocked. I know where the volume buttons are as well. They're the only buttons it has, that and a menu button. But all of those I can find blind reliably.
So if you've got a phone like this HTC phone, where it's not like you can find the power thing by touch because it is raised, but it doesn't move when you push it. It just detects that you've put more pressure there. It's like, again, I don't know if you've sort of seen or used an iPhone 7 or later, or
I try not
like that,
to.
I know it's a long shot, but that's sort of the only thing I can think of that you may have used, or a more modern Kindle that does it as well. So if you so would that count as a button just because you can find it by touch and it only does the one thing, and even though nothing's actually moving, you're just sort of like putting pressure on an unmoving bit of metal?
That's then tricky because it's tactile in that you can find it, but you're not getting a tactile response from pressing it.
And if it vibrated when you did it, if the phone gave a little tz when you pressed it, would that count? Would that be enough feedback?
That's enough feedback for it to be useful. I'm not sure if it's enough feedback for it to be a button. But then I'm not sure that any old school definition of a button really states that it has to move. This feels like a step up from the kind of automatic flush on a public toilet. Just like wave your hand near the thing and it goes.
Well, the infrared things, they're definitely not buttons.
Oh yeah, they're absolutely not buttons. This, you do it. I'm going to say because you need contact with it, that still makes it a button. You still press it to a degree. You don't push it, but you do press it.
Well, I don't agree with you. I think the button has to move.
So, and of course, the more interesting sort of conversation here really is about this idea that we're just going to end up with touchscreens and everything's going to run through that and it's going to be horrendous.
That would be horrific. I mean, these things feel really weird when they're powered off. So at work I use a MacBook Pro. I think it's like the 2016. It's the one with the rubbish keyboard, but it's got the whole trackpad is like this as well. It's just pressure sensitive,
yes,
and doesn't move. And it's got one of those Apple's like haptic feedback things in there that's clever, and it does, like, when it's on, it does an amazing job of like convincing you that it is a button that's moving when you're doing it. But when the thing's powered off and you put pressure on the touchpad, nothing happens, and it's really eerie. And then because Apple makes increasingly buggy software these days, there'll be times where you're using it and it's on and it doesn't do the thing because the software driver for making the thing vibrate isn't responding. And then you'll sort of like click and the computer will register it as a click, but it won't actually do the vibration. It's bizarre.
I was handed a MacBook yesterday just to literally fill in my email address and phone number onto a form, and I immediately panicked when I realised that I didn't know how to click anywhere, and I just did it all through the keyboard because I didn't even want to try and fail. It's weird that Apple have been so keen on this whole idea of, intuitive tech. That's really where the iPhone started, this idea of we want someone to be able to pick this up and kind of know how it works. Just press the thing on the screen. You're not trying to manipulate anything. You're not having to work out a series of buttons to press. Just put your finger on the thing you want. And this feels like more of a step away from that. And the biggest issue I have is especially with the power button. Now that we've got phones where you can't get into the battery compartment, I really like the fact that I have a physical power button that I can press and hold to turn it off if it's gone completely haywire. And the idea that software is involved in registering a button press makes me feel like that is now lost.
I mean, I think on like modern phones, it's not as if that power button doesn't actually like break the circuit in any way. So like it does, you have to like long press. And I think the sort of wiring and the logic for doing a long press as a hard power off, I think is quite deep. I think it's not something that like an Android update is going to break, I don't think. But there is still like software involved. But yeah, I mean, it is sort of like, I think power buttons is sort of like the one that really matters to me, where it's like I want to know that I've pressed it and I don't want any doubt in my mind. And if there's like a software driver that's got to make the thing vibrate so that you know you've pressed it and then that's not working, like I said, it is really unnerving when the MacBook does it. And I think it would be really annoying with the phone, because every now and again you do just need to long press the power button for it to turn off and start over. And it doesn't happen very often, but when you need to do that, you want to know I've pressed this button and I don't want any doubt about it. So I like a really nice tactile mechanical button.
A premium button?
A premium button. This is one of the things that is really nice about iPhones is the power button and the volume buttons they're nice. They have a nice actuation.
If anything, I just want more buttons. I want more things on my phone that I can do. I was going to say physically. I suppose touching a screen is still physical, but I want more tactile stuff.
What would you have buttons that do then?
So on my phone, there is a kind of home button at the bottom middle. There's an unlock button top right, and there's 2 sort of volume buttons on the left side. And for example, as far as I can tell, there's no way to set up one of those buttons to be a shutter button for a photo, which I find really annoying.
Can you not use one of the volume? Most phones, one of the volume buttons can do it.
If I can, then I haven't worked out how.
I mean, I would really like a proper shutter button on a phone, because like the iPhone, you can do the volume buttons, but the way I hold my phone in landscape for taking pictures means that the volume buttons are under my left thumb on the bottom of the phone, which is the wrong place for a shutter button. So having like a button in the bottom right of the phone as you hold it in portrait for camera shutter, that would be cool. One of my old phones did have that, and it was nice. It had a proper, this was before smartphones, so this was like a feature phone, and it had a proper xenon flash in the camera, and then the camera button was a 2-stage thing, so you sort of half press it to do a focus, and then the rest of the way to make it take a picture, and it would have the xenon flash. It was great.
I think what we're learning here is that what we want is a camera.
Yeah, but like, I mean, I have a little camera, and it's little enough I can take it in a lot of places, but like, my phone is a thing that's always on me.
Yeah, I mean, if you like see a UFO, you just want to get your phone out, don't you? You don't want to be running home for the proper camera.
And it's like, oh man, I've got to go get the camera, I've got to put the right lens on it.
By that time, you've been abducted, you got no evidence, everyone thinks you're crazy, it gets in the papers. Yeah. It's a very common scenario.
Yeah.
I could now get into a whole debate about why we haven't had any good UFO evidence since phones became pervasive. But we won't go there. We can talk about something equally creepy, though, in Asimo.
Yeah, Asimo. Asimo's being retired by Honda. Asimo's like one of the first, or well, I don't know if it's one of the first, but it's one of the most like prevalent humanoid robots that I'm aware of. It's not quite as scary as the stuff that Boston Dynamics do, but it's a really cool little robot, and it's been around a long time. I think since 2000, I think is when it sort of first was in the public eye, and yeah, it's being. I think it was like the first one that I remember that was like walking and climbing up stairs and stuff like that. I think the thing can run now. It's a cool little robot, and yeah, they are retiring him now. Sad.
This thing was the big technological advance of the new millennium, despite the fact they'd been working on it for about 20 years. It's played football, it's danced, it's fallen over a lot.
I've seen it conduct orchestras.
Yeah, although that's one of the least impressive things. That's just programming a series of movements. You do that with a robotic arm.
Well, the other thing is once you've got an orchestra that's like knows what they're doing, the conductor's really useful in rehearsals, but by the time you get to a performance, the conductor doesn't really do a lot anymore because people kind of know what they're doing. So yeah, you can get away with a robot that just does a predefined set of things, and the orchestra will know how to deal with it.
So there's a couple of reasons they could be retiring this. It could be the fact that, the stuff we're seeing out of Boston Dynamics gets more public engagement. The kind of uncanny valley stuff still gets quite a lot of press coverage, even if it is for the wrong reasons. And this is starting to look a bit dated. That's one option. The other option is that it became too intelligent.
Yeah, maybe this is not Honda retiring it. This is Asimo going, I'm done. I've done my duty.
Are you suggesting robot suicide?
No, I'm saying that no. I'm suggesting that Asimo has gone, I've had enough of working. I'm gonna choose to retire. Gonna go and do its own thing for a while.
Diodes down his left side are giving him jip. I think Asimo is very much representative of what the original idea of humanoid robots was. It has that sort of spaceman look that became really prevalent just because it was a way of making something human-like but not creepy. And we've really moved away from that now. We're either pushing towards making something indistinguishable from a human or mimicking body styles that actually work rather than stupid primate bipedalness. So, we're working more on four-legged things or spider-like things, which are just better at moving around.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm sad that Asimo will be no more. It was an exciting robot.
Do you know if there was simply one Asimo, or were there multiple versions? Sort of existing simultaneously?
I would guess there are multiple simultaneously.
Doesn't that take away from the charm?
Not really.
I don't know, the idea that it's just one that's kind of developing this personality and almost growing through the new things it gets to do. Kind of like the EMH from Voyager, or Janet from The Good Place. Either works. You know, the idea that it's a single entity that is improving over time, I think has a lot more charm than we have this fleet of things and they look identical and we're going to treat them like they're a person even though there's copies of them.
Yeah, I mean, Asimo has like changed what the thing looks like over time. If you go look at a bunch of pictures of Asimo, it's sort of, it does change and get updated. So like there must be multiple versions of this thing. I doubt it's sort of like, right, we're going to update Asimo, let's find the one we've got, completely take it apart and do it. So like,
what I mean is more, are there multiple versions of the same iteration around? You know, is there going to be one at a trade show in Beijing one day and then a different one in California the next day pretending to be the same one?
I don't know. Wouldn't surprise me if that's how it worked, though.
I just hope it's not like that.
Well, there we go. Sad day as Asimo retires.
I'm sure he's going to go have a nice oil bath, put his feet up, watch the World Cup. I don't know what he's going to do. What do robots like doing? Oh, yes, smashing each other up, of course. That's why we're here.
Segue. Shall we begin then?
Yeah, we have 2 episodes to go through. The plan was kind of to pick and choose fights, and we're going to end up talking about all of them anyway. Except one, which we might skip over completely because just because.
Oh dear. Let's start with Lucky versus Son of Waiachi then.
This is a fight which is interesting for the tactics used by Lucky and then for just total annihilation. What the hell were they going for with that little tail?
I don't understand. I mean, I can see that would work in a very specific situation where, like, if they get like a hit from Son of Waiachi that is entirely orthogonal to that thing, and that's about it. I think any other hit would just rip it off, which is what happened. I don't understand what it was doing.
This reminds me of something that John Reed used to try and do quite a lot. I think he did it when he was at BattleBots with Kilohertz. He did it with Terahertz against Fluffy as well at one point, which I'm sure you don't remember. It was basically an early bar spinner. And he would basically get a bit of like flexible PVC or something, put just a triangle of plastic on the end of it and hope that the opponent would ride up that and flip themselves over. It never worked then. It's not going to work now. You have a really big wedge on the front. Go in with that, which is what they tried to do at the beginning, and it still didn't work. But that's just a thing, you know? Just having that really thin wedge on the back that looks like it was almost tailor-made to be knocked off by an impact from the side.
Yeah, I don't understand it at all. And it wasn't overly firmly mounted either. It was like on a hinge thing, so it was, I guess, even easier to rip off than if it had been welded.
Maybe a little bit of flexibility is good, I don't know. The whole hinging is just to make sure it stays on the floor, which against Son of Waiachi probably doesn't matter that much. Yeah, it was a very strange decision, and one that didn't save them at all.
Well, no, but then part of that, I think, was execution as well, because there was definitely the first big hit that Son of Waiachi got was when Lucky seemed to be very indecisive about which way to go at their opponent with. So they were sort of like forwards and then actually no, and then they sort of spun around a few times, sort of like trying to make up their mind. Do we go reversing or we go forwards in? And then Son of Waiachi just hit them from the side because they kept turning around.
I think they were really good with the aggression on the initial hit. They got straight out the box, got in before they spun up and didn't manage to get a flip in. And then they have just let Son of Waiachi spin up. And once you've done that, running away is basically your option. That is a very heavy and very fast weapon. And we saw the power of it when it literally made 2/3 of their front wedge just teleport to another dimension.
I rewatched that a few times. I never quite managed to tell what happened, but yeah, it was, other than it got ripped off. That was as much as I gleaned.
It was there and then it wasn't. I can't even find the frame in which it's flying away.
We need the slow-mo guys there to film some of this.
I do wonder why we don't have proper slow-mo on set. I'm guessing it's just a lighting issue. The fact you need such heavy lighting to do proper slow-mo.
I think slow-mo is just in general very expensive. I think that's the thing. Because the cameras are not cheap.
Yeah, but surely that's something that Discovery or whatever production company are making this have anyway.
I don't know, because like it took a long time for Mythbusters to get a decent slow-mo camera. And you'd sort of think that, like, even towards the end of their run, where like really good, like the really good like Phantoms and stuff that slow-mo guys use, I think they existed, and slow-mo guys still didn't have them. Not the slow-mo guys, sorry, the Mythbusters still didn't have them, and so yeah, I don't know, like I don't know. I think there's more than just the cost of the camera as well. I think you know, using them is not easy. Doing well with them is not easy. I think, you know, Gav is good at it on the slow-mo guys because he does it a lot and he does it professionally outside of YouTube as well. Like he's done slow-mo on some pretty big films in Hollywood.
Oh yeah, you need a skilled operator for it, like you do lots of things. I just feel like It doesn't seem like something that would be cost prohibitive. I know they are doing this as cheaply as possible. That's probably why they haven't. But at the same time, I don't think it's out of reach.
Yeah.
This Is Fighting Robots had a nice sort of intermediary that they had a sort of bullet time setup, which wasn't quite dialed in properly, so it was a bit janky at times, but that was fun.
Well, I mean, this is the thing. Bullet time is also really expensive because of the difference between getting it 99% right and getting it perfect is just huge. And I think the same is going to be true of slow-mo stuff, of sort of getting it right and getting it almost right, I think is a very big difference. And I think to bridge that gap requires a lot of time and money and expertise, especially in something as unpredictable as live robot fighting, you know?
The This Is Fighting Robots version of it was probably at the sort of 95% working state. And I thought it still added a lot just like that. But that is also probably a higher budget production than BattleBots.
Yeah, I don't know. No slow-mo, though. It's a shame.
No slow-mo. Well, we have the semi-slow-mo, don't we?
But not proper slow-mo.
What's the minimum level of slow-mo you'd want?
I don't know. I mean, the slow-mo we get is fine, actually. Like, there's nothing wrong with it. But I think it would be great to have a slow-mo shot of someone actually ripping that the front of Lucky off. But I don't think they're ever going to do it.
I just think it would do a much better job of actually showing the power of these hits to more casual viewers. I think once you can see the way that hit will have, by the looks of it, torn that metal down, or I don't know if it's torn or sheared or what, but it seems like it has just come clean off. I think being able to see that happen slower is going to really hammer home how hard that's hitting.
It would be really cool. So I'm sort of thinking what you'd need to do to get that right. So you'd need many thousands of frames per second, which means you'd need a lot of light, and you need a lot of light that is not flickering on the mains frequency or is flickering in sync with the frame rate. And you're gonna need to have a really tight shot on it as well. I think the wide shot that they sort of normally get, I think, wouldn't be enough to sort of see the detail we want to see. I think you'd need to zoom in quite a bit, and then framing that and keeping it framed would be insanely difficult. I think this is sort of what I mean when I say it's cost prohibitive, is to do it well, at least to do it in the way that I've got in my head, would just require an entire team just dedicated to pointing a whole bunch of slow-mo cameras and all trying to frame the same thing in the hope that one of them gets it right. And then you've got a time when you hit the button to actually do the recording, because obviously, like slow-mo cameras, they record backwards in time, like they're always recording, and then you hit the button to save the last 30 seconds, or well, not even that, last 5 seconds or whatever, depending on the frame rate. And yeah, I just think it's a really hard thing to do. So it doesn't surprise me that they don't have properly good slow-mo.
Yeah, I suppose generally speaking, when we're seeing slow-mo done, it is shots that have been set up for that camera, rather than cameras trying to capture action that's already happening. Yeah,
like all the stuff that the slow-mo guys do, or anything else that you sort of see in films and stuff, it's incredibly well planned and figured out ahead of time.
Wait, you mean Hollywood movies aren't shot spontaneously? It's not all just happening and they bring a camera?
I mean, some of them are like that. But no, they're not, Shockingly, many years goes into planning them.
Well, you have both convinced me and broken my heart.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
As a final note on this fight, and sort of again getting back round to that idea of making sure that people understand the scale of what's happening, I really love how often we're seeing the broken pieces of robots in people's hands. The fact that we got to see that sort of big hinge section that was holding that wedge on the rear, sort of in Chris's hands, looking mangled, showing the size of it and the weight of it. I think that's a really useful thing for communicating that. And it also just looks cool.
Yeah, you're right. There's a lot of the teams are picking up bits of their robot and walking around with it as well. I mean, I think later on when Bronco are fighting, I think they've got the front of their robot at the end of the fight as well.
And we're also seeing sort of behind the scenes stuff of bits being examined and handed around and given out and things like that. So, for example, the lockjaw wheel against Endgame a couple of episodes ago.
Yeah. Good stuff.
Right, let's get on to a fight where nothing was going to get knocked off then. Sawblades versus Mohawk.
Yeah, there's not... I mean, Sawblades just dominated this fight, somewhat unsurprisingly. Mohawk just could never get under Sawblades, because I presume because of the front wheels on Mohawk. I guess the only other interesting thing here was the Kevlar that Mohawk used.
Yes. I wonder how close that comes to entanglement. It seems to me that you're basically using a densely packed set of fibres to try and gum up the blade.
Yeah, I don't know actually. I mean, it didn't even occur to me to consider this entanglement. Like Kevlar, just for me is the armor to use against a saw. So yeah, it did its job.
Oh yeah, it was very effective.
Do you reckon it was so effective that they would the rules need to change? Is that what you're saying?
Oh no, not at all.
I don't think it is entanglement. I think it's far enough away from sort of what we think about with like in terms of nets and stuff like that. I think it's far enough away that it's fine.
Yeah, this isn't quite complete control versus Ghost Raptor, is it?
No, not at that level.
As fun as that was. But yeah, even with that, it's total domination from Sawblaze. Mohawk might be a powerful crusher, but as I've said so many times, a crusher is only as good as its wedge. And the wedge on Mohawk doesn't really seem to be doing the job.
No, and then they've got the problem with the slow weapon as well. Because they sort of got under Sawblaze a couple of times, not for the world's greatest sort of crush, but they got under enough that they could have done something if the weapon were quicker, but they didn't.
Sucks to be them. Although, again, Sawblaze, even if you're going wedge to wedge with Sawblaze, the only thing you're going to get a grip on is their wedge. It's so well driven that you're not really going to get a chance to get around the back or get around the side. It's always in control. Jameson's driving is fantastic.
Yeah, he does an amazing job of keeping the front of his robot pointing forwards.
He also seems like a really fair driver. His strategy is completely reliant on pinning a robot, but he never really seems to push the boundaries in terms of how long he's allowed to. He'll go in, he'll make a cut, and he will back properly off.
Yeah. Well, yeah, as opposed to sort of like technically letting them go, but still sort of keeping them in a corner, for example.
Yeah, just pull back for a second and then just ram straight back in under and do the same. He doesn't do that. Whereas quite a lot of drivers do like doing that.
Yeah, like a Warrior Dragon, for example.
Yeah, who was that fight against? Overhaul, wasn't it?
Rotator.
Oh, okay. I was making a really bad segue into Chomp Overhaul.
Well, no, I was thinking of Warrior Dragon versus Rotator when I said that Warrior Dragon do the technically letting them go, but keep them in the corner thing.
Actually, yeah, that's a really good example.
So the next fight was Mecha Rampage versus Whiplash, which was boring, and then we had Chomp versus Overhaul. And this was another fight involving Chomp and a judge's decision.
I mean, we still haven't stopped having arguments about the last one, or should I say I haven't stopped having arguments about the last one, because there are still stupid people out there who are wrong.
Oh, God.
And that needs to be addressed, and it is my job and my job alone to do so. I mean, I think if this had been a split decision, people would have been more on board with it. Because Chomp did at least have that period of dominance towards the end where Overhaul was on the edge of immobile.
Yeah, I see. The first time I watched this, I was sort of a bit surprised that it wasn't the split decision. But then on re-watching it, like, Chomp was the dominant robot for the last, 10 or 15 seconds. Like, it was, at least in terms of what we saw on the edit anyway. So it's sort of like most of the fight was controlled by Overhaul. And Overhaul were doing a really good job of, using the arena hazards to do damage to Chomp and stuff as well. So I sort of feel like most of the fight was Overhaul. So I'm kind of, yeah, I'm not surprised now that it was unanimously Overhaul's, and I think that was the right choice, obviously.
Oh, it's completely correct. To me, this is one of those fights where the flow of the fight as you watch it gives you a really clear winner, but the way the rules are written, it's not that hard to give it to Chomp still, because really, when you look at the state of the two robots at the end, Chomp probably gets all the damage points. And, for me, if I'm judging it, aggression, control, and strategy all go to Overhaul. It's their win no matter what. But I can see how, potentially you might give Chomp aggression for swinging the hammer around a bit. I'll say again, I think it's completely the correct decision, but I was fully anticipating someone making it split.
It didn't happen. What do you think of Chomp's barrel roll in that fight?
That's why we love Chomp. That's what Chomp is for.
I don't even understand. I don't understand how they did that. I don't understand how them moving the hammer resulted in a perfect barrel roll. It was amazing.
See, everyone keeps saying that Chomp has a really high centre of gravity. And the team have said time and time again that no, all the stuff that's up top is actually quite low density stuff. The centre of gravity is still around that sort of green belt area on the bottom. I think what's making it flip over is slight asymmetry in the hammer firing, because it's got so much flexibility in it in particular. I imagine that any asymmetry in that puts them over, so in that case they've got just the right amount of asymmetry to do a full barrel roll and look amazing.
Yeah, so obviously, yes, like we're saying, like the left brace bends more than the right one, for example, and yeah, that would throw the hammer in not a straight motion. Yeah, that would do it, wouldn't it?
And they've made those arms even thinner now and even more flexible. So, you know, if, say, for example, they were turning left just before firing the hammer, that's going to put the balance off quite a lot, really. Considering the forces involved, any imbalance is going to be multiplied. So that's the only reason I could think of that they do it so much.
Yeah, I think that it's not that I don't think Chomp, or I'm trusting that the Chomp team are correct when they say that their centre of gravity is not very high. But I think the way the hammer works and the fact that they've got quite a narrow robot relative to other things, I can sort of see why you would look at that and go, that must be top heavy. Yeah, whereas if you compare it to like Beta or something, which is very low and wide and consequently much more stable. Well, I say much more stable.
Well,
it is more stable. It doesn't flip over quite as much.
it flips over because it's got an insane amount of power. Although Chomp does as well, to be fair. I do want to question whether Overhaul was mobile at the end of that fight, because the rules state that, in fact, I'll read it word for word. A robot that can only rotate in place due to a partial failure of the drive mechanism is considered to be non-responsive. And 20 seconds of non-responsiveness equals immobility equals elimination. And it seemed to me like they'd lost drive on one side and were just spinning in place.
Is it 20 seconds, is it?
Yeah, it's 20 seconds, the last 10 of which are counted allowed by a referee. One thing I haven't been able to find in the rules is whether you can get saved by the bell or not. Because in some competitions, this is Fighting Robots was one of them, if the countdown started and was interrupted by the buzzer for the end of the fight, it carried on. And I know that's done in some other competitions as well.
I think in BattleBots, if you're in the last 20 seconds of the fight then and you lose drive at that point, I think it goes to a judges. I think you can be saved by the bell, because I think that's happened.
I'm fairly sure it has as well. I just don't know if it's ever been sort of set in stone that is the way it happens. And I don't know if the judges are taking the immobility into account.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely happened, and I think, Kenny and Chris will reference that as well. They'll sort of often in these tense fights at the end, they will say last 10 seconds, it's they're not going to get counted out now. They do make that point in their commentary.
I hadn't spotted that. What I have spotted is them constantly saying that a dominant final 10 seconds from one robot will really sway the judges when the judges are making a points-based decision, which I've always found a bit weird. But
well, you almost feel like it should. I mean, there's in this fight with Chomp, it's sort of Chomp has such a dominant end, really, where it sort of really kind of suddenly comes out and does a lot of damage. You almost want them to win at that point, but yeah, it isn't. That's not the way it's judged. So yeah, I can sort of see why they say that, but they are wrong.
One thing we should probably mention as well is how bad the auto-targeting seemed to be in this fight.
It's fun. They need to reboot the hard drive to fix it.
That's how you fix everything, so...
Yeah, rebooting hard drives.
I mean...
That hurt me.
I heard that the size of the hard drive is actually the reason it has such a low centre of gravity. All the mass is in the hard drive. And that's been put right on bottom.
Oh, dear. Yeah, it did seem to sort of treat the... the square bits that hold the screws, it did sort of seem to treat that as a robot and fire at that a few times. It was weird.
And then didn't seem to fire very effectively at the actual robot until it literally wasn't moving. It's a shame because it was the main strength of Chomp last time round. Some of the hits it got, you look at them and go, well, a human probably wouldn't have been able to make those. Whereas this time around, so far, it seems to have been making things harder rather than easier. I'm sure they're getting data from it that they can use to dial it back in, but it is a shame to see Chomp struggle like this.
Yeah. One day they'll get... Have they ever had a definitive win? Or has it been a judges every time?
Captain Shredderator fight, I believe, was a knockout, although they kept knocking it back into life.
Oh, yeah. Yes, I remember that one.
Disco Inferno was definitely a decision, because that was the first contentious sort of definition of aggression-based decision. I'm fairly sure Bite Force was, but they disabled the weapon within the first 20 seconds. They were basically assured the win. And then Yeti, they lost by knockout.
Well, do you want to do the Mohawk bit with the haircut, or do you not care about that?
Oh, I care about that very deeply. I had my first haircut for 7 months the other day. It's very much a hot topic for me. I didn't get a Mohawk. I feel like it was a missed opportunity.
I don't know what I want to say about this, other than it just made me laugh that all the millennials were there having fun together.
I'm just glad that the other Bales brother got some airtime. Although Will was still there, right in his face, trying to get on camera. Also nice to finally see a bit of Craig Danby, when presumably he should have been making his robot work.
Oh, that... Wonder, do you want to talk about Predator quickly? I mean, I watched that little Rumble thing that you sent me.
Yeah, I mean, we can bring it up later and bring it up now. It doesn't matter, because obviously we've got a lot of on-aired fights we now need to contend with. But no, it turns out, further to our discussion a couple of episodes ago about potentially reshooting boring fights, there have been 4 fights so boring that they never made it to air. 2 of which involved... Or is it 2 of which or just 1 of which? No, we saw the other one, I think. But 1 of which involved Predator literally just breaking down within a few seconds, apparently.
It's just like... I mean, is that guy capable of building a robot that works? That's what I want to know at this point.
I'm going to categorically say yes, although it's becoming harder and harder to do that. I have absolute faith that Craig Danby is a good builder.
No, you have no evidence to back that up.
I mean, sometimes you just got to work on gut feeling, you know? There's no way that Craig would be as well loved in the community as he is if he were incompetent. The fact he is respected by people that we know build good stuff must mean that the stuff he builds is good.
Well, is he respected for having like good ideas, but not necessarily being able to execute them very well? Is that the thing?
I mean, do we need to draw that distinction? Do we have to draw the distinction that makes my argument fall apart?
I mean, because you can have people that are like very good at giving advice to other people in their life, right? But I'm not necessarily good at following that advice themselves. And maybe Craig is like this. Maybe he can see all the problems and the flaws in other people's robots. And then go, you need to change that, use these motors, use that speed control or whatever. Or like, you know, build it in this way and it'll work. And then they build fantastic robots. Oh, Craig, he's a god. He must be really good at building robots because he gave me all this advice. And as a result, I built an amazing robot. But then when Craig is building his own robots, he can't see all those problems and flaws. And as a result, builds rubbish robots.
So he's saying he should join the podcast as a 3rd member. I mean, I don't know which of those it is. I would argue that if you are giving good advice to enough builders, you get credit for a little percentage of all their builds, which adds up to a whole robot.
No, I'm sure, like in all seriousness, I'm sure the guy is capable of building a good robot. It just seems to be very unfortunate that in every televised event that I've seen that it's not worked. Because I have seen footage from live events where it's done well. So I know he can build a robot that works. It's just funny that anything on television and it fails miserably.
At the end of the day, he's out there trying to put on a show just like everyone else is. And it must be intensely frustrating for him to basically have opportunities to entertain and then not be able to do it. That must be horrible. And I really feel for the guy because I'm a big fan of everything he builds, except the paint scheme on Predator. But apart from that, I'm a big fan of everything he builds.
Yeah.
So yeah, in other unaired fight news, Ultimo Destructo has 2 wins and no defeats, which is a sentence that we should never have been able to say. If anybody really wants to sort of do the digging, all of the fight results are now up on the BattleBots website. So if there are unaired fights, they'll be part of that machine's record. So you can go look at the details of precisely how Predator just destroyed the reputation of a nation.
Yeah.
Talking of reputations of nations, Endgame are promising to put New Zealand on the map. It's well overdue.
It is well overdue. And I feel like this fight is not going to help them in that crusade.
It's the main event curse.
What's going on with these main events? They are not universally the worst fights, but they're increasingly often they're the worst fights.
Well, often what we're getting for a main event is a big, powerful spinner versus a big, powerful spinner.
Yeah.
And when we got that from Tombstone and Minotaur, it turned out to be incredible. It turns out that most robots aren't Tombstone or Minotaur. And most robots don't necessarily like dealing out and taking big hits repeatedly. So I think we're getting much more interesting undercard fights because we're getting stuff like, you know, Sawblaze Mohawk, for example. That's a really interesting matchup. It's not the sort of thing that would sell tickets necessarily, but there's much more strategy to that fight. There's much more that can happen, and crucially, there's much more chance it to actually go the distance. No one wants to build up to a short fight, but that's what you're probably going to get when you put the big hitters in the arena.
But then this wasn't even a fight of, like, massive hits, particularly.
There were a couple of hits, I suppose.
Yeah, but they weren't like the really, like, you sort of talk about having like 2 high energy spinners in here, and you sort of think that's a short fight that ends because of one monumental, you know, universe starting hit. That's fine. I'm okay with that. But this was sort of like an average hit from Bite Force, and then not a lot else, and then one other hit from Bite Force that put Endgame upside down, and that was it. It wasn't spectacular in the way that you'd sort of hope it would be with two robots like this.
It kind of had an element of drama with Bite Force being immobile for a while, which maybe justifies it a bit more, but it's not much of a fight.
Yeah. Do you know what happened with Endgame there? Like, why did they not go... Were they being polite when they didn't go in when Endgame wasn't moving? But then their weapon wasn't spinning either.
I think they were being broken more than
like,
polite.
Yeah. Because all the commentary was sort of like, why weren't Endgame going in? And I was sort of thinking, well, at the very least, I would expect them to have their weapon going at full speed near them so that they're ready if they start moving again, because that's what most teams do. That seems like a sensible idea. But I mean, they were just sort of... But they weren't even doing victory laps, I don't think. If they were sort of like spinning to win in the middle, I'd be like, well, they're being cocky and stupid. But they weren't doing that. They were just sort of like no weapon spinning and kind of juddering around the arena a little bit.
And when they did try to get the weapon back up to speed, it really didn't get up to any kind of speed.
Yeah, I think the weapon was definitely broken, because when they were upside down at the end there, I'm sort of not sure if these weapon motors have the startup torque to flip the robot, but they must do. There must be enough power in that motor that even when it's upside down, it can start moving, and it didn't.
Yeah, that's kind of similar to the bombshell situation where it's meant to do that, but so far hasn't. I feel like if they go over with the weapon spinning, they're going to be fine. Although they're probably going to be bouncing around a bit and taking quite a lot of damage from that, they're at least going to have a chance of getting back over.
Yeah, we saw that in the beginning of the fight.
This all kind of reminds me of something you said ages ago now, that at the time I didn't realise how smart it was, about almost designing a robot to lose in certain ways. So, for example, Bronco versus Minotaur. Bronco loses because all of its wheels have been taken off, and everything else is kind of fine. That's quite repairable damage. I feel like it's almost better for Endgame, once its weapon isn't working properly, it's better for it to lose quickly by being stuck upside down than to have to take its beating. So as much as you could say, oh, just put a dedicated tree mech on it, make the sacrifice in a bit of armour or a bit of weapon mass or whatever, but do they want to self-right if the weapon isn't working? Really?
Yeah, it is a gamble, isn't it, whether you want to do that? Because, I mean, you could self-right. I mean, so, like, in this situation, Bite Force has already shown that it's a bit unreliable in its drive or something about it. So you might almost sort of think, maybe we'll flip the coin, we'll right ourselves and see if we can stay out of their way long enough for them to kind of just break. But yeah, I mean, it's a gamble. And yeah, I think failing in a controlled way is good. I mean, you know, the guy was unhappy, let's say, when he lost that, or when he was sort of flipped. So I sort of feel like he'd much rather have carried on almost.
Although that could be anger at the general situation of the weapon not working as well.
Yeah.
Or just anger at not winning, which we all feel from time to time. And of course, I've just realised a massive flaw in my logic is any knockout tournament. No one's going to go, it's okay, we'll just happily lose this one and not get damaged and be out.
Yeah, if it's straight knockout the whole way, then yeah, you want to you want to be able to self-right, because you never know.
And that sadly is all I really have to say on this one. I'm still a bit underwhelmed by it.
Yeah, it wasn't a great fight, but there you go. Such is life. I'd like to know what happened with Endgame, like why their movement was a bit weird and why their weapon didn't work. But
well, we have another Botopsy report coming on the Wednesday showing on the Science Channel, so hopefully that might feature them.
cool.
I'd love a whole episode of just behind the scenes, personally. Just looking at the damage, seeing the teams mess about a bit.
I'm kind of surprised there's not been a video on Tested with Adam looking around, because that happened last time, I think.
Yes, I'm surprised too. Well, actually, it wasn't. I don't think it was Adam. I think it was largely another guy, and Adam was there as a judge, that kind of cameoed.
Yeah, that is true. Yeah, it was. I forget the other guy's name because I'm a terrible person. But yeah, I think you're right.
Norm?
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah.
From Tested. That's his full name.
Norm from Tested.
Just like your full name is Spinnerproof Sam. I mean, we did have William Osman instead, which I think is a perfectly good replacement. Although I feel like you still haven't watched those videos because you're a grumpy old man. Sorry, a grumpy young man.
Yeah, you're older than me, mate. You can't be calling me old.
We could be both old and older.
Yeah, well, exactly. As long as you're older, that's fine.
We're tangenting here, aren't we? We should get back on track.
Should we move on to episode 8 of BattleBots then?
On to episode 8, and probably the best intro of the series so far.
What was this intro?
So we've got Chris stood outside the test box.
Oh yeah, driving the box. Yeah.
Chomp is casually chilling on its side in the test box. We've got Swamp Thing on a trolley, just making a little cameo. And then we've got Will Bales driving around in the box cart. This is like all of the fun stuff that we saw before the series aired, just rolled into one, and I love it.
So you'd like this one more than the Farouk intro, then?
Yeah, the Farouk intro was interesting, but this tied up a couple of these. I mean, this has basically tied up Bot 56 for us. It's Swamp Thing. We knew it was there anyway, but
now we know. Now we know.
We know
You're
now.
saying it's not jellyfish?
I mean, it could have been a massively resprayed jellyfish.
I mean, because I've got photographic evidence that it was jellyfish.
That is true. I mean, both are pretty convincing. We'll have to wait until the full season has aired to see if jellyfish does make its long-awaited appearance. I love how I forgot that I'd done that for quite a lot of that conversation.
Oh dear. All right then, we have Warrior Dragon versus Rotator.
This is both a great fight and an awful fight.
This is a very tactical fight in many ways, and I wouldn't say it's awful, but it's not the most enjoyable fight to watch.
It got very bashy, and very is that robot mobile-y.
Yeah, I mean, so we mentioned earlier about like Warrior Dragons kind of like will pin a robot and then technically let them go, but not really let them go anywhere. And they did this a little bit with Chomp as well, where they sort of like sit under where they know they're going to self-right and stuff. And it is fine and it's good, but it's one of those things where it's completely within the rules, but it's maybe not within the spirit of the competition that I'd like to see anyway. It's kind of like hard to I don't know. I always find it hard to watch when a robot is like not letting the other robot do anything, which, you know, it makes sense. They're doing the right thing for their robot and to win the competition, but it's not. I guess it doesn't make for the best television, I guess is what I'm saying. It
feels a tiny bit tornado-y, doesn't it? In a very different way, but it's got that same kind of vibe of, this is allowed, but it doesn't mean we're going to like you for doing it.
Yeah.
What I love is that the time you're talking about, where it took Warrior Dragon a good 10 seconds to gradually manoeuvre a barely mobile rotator towards the wall, was classed as next level driving by Kenny. Look at that there. They're sort of moving their opponent using their inactive weapon. Next level driving.
You clearly don't understand. You know, what's the copy past it? It takes quite a high IQ to understand the nuance of what's going on there.
To be fair, you have to have a very high IQ to understand Warrior Dragon. And yes, I do have a Warrior Dragon tattoo. And no, you can't see it. It's for the ladies' eyes only.
Oh, I'm glad you know that better than me.
I've done a few versions.
Oh dear. So Rotator had their tactics here. They came out with the bar spinners this time, and they only had the one spinning as well, which I thought was cool.
It was interesting, but I think it led to some instability issues for them, where the robot seemed to be rocking back and forwards on the wheels when it doesn't usually do that. So I'm wondering if it's usually quite reliant on the gyroscopic effect of both discs to keep it level.
And I know why So like they don't need the one that's on top to spin, because I presume that's too high and can't actually hit Warrior Dragon. But I don't know what, other than using less power, what the benefit of not having them both spinning is.
I'm not sure either.
It's sort of like it's like it's unnecessary. I think is not enough reason to not have them both spinning. Because it's like, well, you might as well, because they did spin it up eventually, and they hit the drone, which was quite cool. But you sort of think I don't know, I just sort of think having both spinning, like I said, you sort of mentioning it would potentially lead to more stability in that robot. And I just don't see why not.
I'd always assumed they weren't even independently controlled.
Yeah, I was surprised they could do just the one on its own.
And we have seen them turn it on to take out the drone, which is the one thing that maybe makes this a worthwhile fight. Another drone death. Always welcome. Yeah, it was a very strategic fight from them. I'd like that they went for bars over discs, because obviously a disc is more susceptible to being gotten under by a wedge. You know, they've got this whole sort of circumference that a wedge can safely come under and not get hit by a tooth, whereas with the bar, the tooth is going to come across and sideswipe them. They're sort of counter-rotating to Warrior Dragon as well, which I really like. That gave us a fight with lots of hits but not too much damage, which I always appreciate. But I do think they were immobile. They seem to have some issue with one side of the drive. They were just going around in circles for a large part of that fight. And then it recovered for a bit, and then it went again. And if Warrior Dragon hadn't spontaneously combusted, they wouldn't have got anything out of this fight.
Yeah, mobility is a hard one. I mean, so you're sort of saying it's sort of like were they immobile for more than 20 seconds? Because I would always assumed it was 10 seconds because that's obviously only here the last 10. But 20 seconds I think is quite a long time to not be moving.
They were immobile for a long time without us being shown that a countdown was happening. Maybe it wasn't they sort of beat it. I don't know, but I feel like this sort of style of immobility basically never gets counted out. We had this with Lucky against Scorpios as well, where for most of that fight, one side of their drive wasn't working and there was no whisper of them being counted out.
Rules need to be consistently applied, BattleBots people.
I worry that they're just letting it go in the hope of a longer fight with more big hits in it, which is a valid approach from an entertainment perspective.
Well, is it though? Because I mean, you described this fight, and I kind of agree. It got a bit bashy towards the end, and I don't know that is more entertaining.
Well, it was good that Rotator did get going again for a minute. It adds a bit of low-level drama. It gave him a chance to get the weapon in again, which they didn't really take. Because the weapon seemed unbalanced as well after a couple of hits. There's some quite major vibration when that was running.
Yeah, I suppose that one last hit was kind of, nice to see, I suppose, but tricky one.
I can't remember who won this fight. It's completely slipped my mind. I think it was Rotator, wasn't it?
It was a split judges decision, and it went to Rotator in the end, yeah.
I haven't actually thought to assess that decision properly. I should have.
I think it's a hard one to fight, because like both robots took damage, and I would argue that Warrior Dragon was in control of the fight for most of it. It's sort of hard to know, but then, Rotator got the last hit, the last big hit, and Rotator sort of did the bigger, the more obvious damage, I guess. So yeah, I don't know. I think it is a hard one.
I suppose damage is probably going to be split, because Warrior Dragon's weapons aren't working, but Rotator's drive isn't properly working either. So in a way, they've both taken a similar amount of damage. Whether they've dealt out a similar amount of damage is hard to judge, but they seem to have taken about the same. Aggression, Rotator has got a better chance of picking up purely because they had a weapon working for longer. So I think it's reasonable to assume that a lot of judges would give them the aggression. Control, I agree, goes to Warrior Dragon. And I suppose strategy, it's whether you class strategy partly as the way a robot comes into the fight set up. Because if you take it as that, the fact they've switched from discs to bars, that's strategy. The fact they're only running one part of the weapon, that's strategy. The fact they've managed to take out the drone by getting the other bit of weapon working, that's also strategy. The fact they're counter-rotating, that's strategy. So I think it's fairly easy to give them the win in that respect. And again, I'm not calling it particularly contentious. I felt like they won that fight if you go with the idea that they weren't immobile. Yeah,
given that it went to judges, I think Rotator was the right call. But yeah, it's interesting about the immobility thing, isn't it, I suppose?
And I just wish they'd talk about the rules a bit more on the show. It's exactly the same as we had with Robot Wars. We're getting decisions made. 20 seconds of a judge explaining why they gave it that way, I think that would help a lot. Because so many people are still confused by the whole aggression thing. Sort of, oh, well, Warrior Dragon pushed them around with their broken flipper, so they're really aggressive. It's like, yeah, I agree with you in normal usage of the word, but in BattleBots, that's not what aggression is.
Yeah, I think that is kind of weird in many ways. They have this slightly different idea of what aggression is. That it's not the obvious definition.
They have the definition of aggression that forces robots to bring weapons and use them and make better show.
Yeah, I guess it's sort of easier to judge that as well.
Although I still think that if you define aggression the other way, I think you make spinner killing a more viable strategy. So something like Duck, for example, who we're going to come on to next, they've had to go with the little lifty thing on the weapon, which is completely tokenistic, when if they were allowed to come in just with a wedge, which is the most effective weapon in robot combat history, if they were allowed to come in with that and go up against, say, Tombstone and just drive at them and drive at them and drive at them and get that class as aggression, they could come out of that fight as winners. But BattleBots wants a spinner heavy meta. They want spinners hitting spinners, they want big explosions and sparks, and we kind of want that too. It's just, I'd like a bit less of it sometimes.
I'm quite happy with sparks and fire and explosions. Makes me happy. Gives me a warm, fuzzy feeling.
It's a very warm, fuzzy feeling if it's fire, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, more flippers would be good, for example. More hammers would be good. More lifters would be good. Just a bit more variety I think we'd see if that rule was done slightly differently.
Well, start your own robot combat thing. Show.
What, with blackjack and hookers?
Yeah, exactly.
You provide the blackjack, I'll provide the hookers.
Moving on, we have duck versus reality.
Oh, I get to go on a rant.
Oh dear, here we go.
First things first, I can't remember if it was Kenny or Chris, it doesn't matter. I'm now judging them as a pair. Referred to Duck's weapon as a wedge. I'd like to think that we have ascertained and we have all agreed that Duck's weapon is not a wedge. It's a weird shield thing, and I love it. That's point number one.
Which bit of it? Which bit of it you talking about the whole thing, or like? I mean, I want to make an argument that the orange bit is a wedge.
It's a fork.
I don't know. For me, a fork needs to have at least 2 prongs.
A fork. Well, actually, I suppose a forklift usually has 2.
Yeah.
I suppose a fork has multiple tines. I can see why you think that, and I'm going to have a hard time telling you why you're completely and utterly wrong.
I think you need to have 2 of them, man. I think this little thing. I think it's not a spike because it is wedge shaped for me. I don't know. I think it's a little very narrow wedge.
It's a tine. It's one of the constituent parts of a fork. How does that work for you? Hang on. If a robot... Okay, so think Panic Attack, for example. That was always described as lifting forks.
Well, by who?
By the very reliable Jonathan Pierce.
Yeah, we're going to rely on him for definition of weapons and armour, are we?
But no, we would definitely call that forks. King Buxton, you'd call it forks.
I'd call it a fork.
I'm looking forward to... Actually, we've even spoken about King Buxton. I want to go back and find you calling it forks now, but that's going to be the work of days.
Oh, man. If you can find... I mean, I'm sure... now that I think about it, I'm sure... Well, I don't know. Am I sure it'll happen? I don't know. It would be your glory moment, I think, if you can find a recording of me describing King Buxton's weapon as forks or panic attacks. Because we've spoken... Like, panic attack has come up. And if you can just hear me describe that as forks, then yeah.
I mean, earlier in this recording, I described Minotaur as having forks as an option, and you didn't argue with it. So that was tacit approval, which to me is the same as saying it.
I mean, often you make errors in your grammar and I don't call you out on it. It doesn't mean that I'm okay with it.
No, that's tacit approval of my stupidity. I'd argue that just doing a podcast with me is approval of that.
Look, I hope that by doing this podcast, I can bring you forwards in your understanding of the English language and definitions of things.
And I'm confident that by doing this podcast, I just generally drag you down.
You do. You get me saying Minotaur occasionally when it's clearly Minotaur.
Coyote.
Oh, I don't even want to try and say that.
Anyway, there's a second part to this argument that kind of links in with this, which is that they've then gone on to compare the masses of the weapons. 2 issues with how they've done this. 1, mass of a rotating weapon, really important. Mass of a lifter, just no. And then second of all, they've only counted the beak. They've not counted the other 25 pounds of steel behind it.
That really cracked me up.
It was a 35-pound wedge. Sorry, a 30-pound wedge, and then it was a 5-pound weapon.
I'm going to call that tacit approval of calling the whole thing a wedge. Victory!
I was quoting.
It's tacit approval.
The fight, I thought, was going to go very differently. I thought that reality was absolutely screwed due to their massive amount of ground clearance. But Duck wasn't doing too well on the weapon timing. It was getting under, but not getting the lifter up in time to really control the fight.
You've got to think as well, because most of the time they got the weapon under there and lifting, it was under the, dare I call it a drum? Under reality's weapon, which is spinning like in such a way that once they sort of once Duck lifts them up a little bit, they'd sort of be sort of pushed backwards off their wedge on the front.
I feel like the fork would very nicely fit behind the weapon once they lifted it up.
That's true, yeah.
Tacit approval.
The thing is, we're just gonna be constantly like passive aggressively describing these weapons how we want.
Isn't that what we've been doing for over 30 episodes now? Just passive aggressively trying to make the other person agree with us.
I feel like it's escalating.
But yeah, I suppose this is a classic example of a spinner having to take the power of its own hits and not managing to, whilst a brick can.
Yeah. Yeah, this is a funny old fight, isn't it? Because you sort of think this is reality's all the way until very suddenly it isn't anymore because they've just stopped. And
that's what Duck is there to do. It breaks your fist with its face.
It could take a beating if nothing else.
It's a plucky competitor.
Oh, it's a foul joke. I don't even know if ducks count as foul.
They're waterfowl, yeah. What? That's just a fact. What's funny about that fact?
No, I'm glad that my joke is valid. That's all.
Should we move on to a true meme battle then?
Yes, Hypershock versus Battle Royale with cheese, and I wanna appreciate I can't even say it. Smactose intolerant. Another one of Farouk's puns that's just glorious.
That and the fact that it's called Shorter Pounder in itself is just...
Oh.
It's so dense. We have a rake. We have everything we want except a fully working Hypershock.
This is just memes galore, yeah. Well, fully working Hypershock or Battle Royale with cheese, also not fully working.
Oh yeah, I have lower expectations of that. Although the test box footage we've seen shows that they can get it going.
When just before this fight sort of started, sort of in the intro bit of it, I was like thinking, because obviously they're all saying Hypershock should win that fight, and Hypershock should. But because they kept saying that, I was like, oh my God, they're not going to win, are they? It's sort of like, because they were setting expectations in such a way, I was like, Battle Royale's going to win this. And I had a really nasty feeling that was how it was going to go. And thankfully it didn't. But yeah, it was, I think, I don't know, that would be crazy. I would like to see Battle Royale's weapon go at full speed.
Oh, absolutely, because I think that's going to have a fair amount of power behind it. I'm glad it didn't happen against Hypershock, because Hypershock is a robot that I both love and feel is highly competitive. Probably wrong on that, but it has the potential to be. It's a meta design.
To criticise Hypershock a little bit, right? Their robot is very fast, and I'd argue it's almost too fast, and it's also very bouncy because of the rubber air-filled tyres. So you could sort of see a few times where in one of the slow-mo shots we did we got a slow-mo shot of Hypershock hitting Shorter Pounder, and no, Hypershock bounced a lot, and it almost like as it sort of like I guess they sort of like came in and they sort of pulled back on their throttle and kind of stopped, and as the front wheels kind of like stopped and slowed down, rather than it sort of skidding or stopping the robot, it kind of like suddenly bounced up a little bit and then hit Shorter Pounder and stuff. I don't know. It's a very
it kind of noses down and then reacts from that, doesn't it?
Yeah, it bounces around a lot, and then because they're also very they run up other, like, even they were somehow running up Battle Royale with cheese, somehow getting on top of it, which was just mad. So it's sort of, I think there are flaws in that. As gorgeous as that robot is, I think there are flaws in its design.
The original Hypershock was kind of built around the idea of let's be really quick. And Will Bales is a very good driver who can handle that. So I think that's kind of part of the strategy almost. But I completely agree. The way they've gone with the big chunky wheels in particular do seem to be making it quite difficult to control. And I don't know how much of that then leads to the issues they're having with the weapon as well. Because the weapon seemed to get spun up and then kind of almost stop dead. So I'm wondering if the bounce they've got in those wheels is causing it to catch the floor or something like that. I've got no idea what's going on there. But against any other opponent, they probably wouldn't have got very far.
No. But thankfully, they were not against any other opponent.
Yeah, and they made the most of it. I feel like there were maybe one or two hits more than we needed.
Yeah, they kept going right to the end, right until the buzzer was given at that point. That was almost too far, I think.
Although we don't know that that's precisely how it played out. That could have been a little bit of sneaky edit. There's always that possibility that we have to remember. It's just a shame that beautiful top bun has taken damage, because that was so nicely made. Although I do wonder if they'll just come in with like a foam one that will probably be better.
I mean, that basically was foam. That crumpled so easily. It's unsurprising that there's...
Oh, yeah, it was very thin steel.
Yeah, it's obviously not going to have any weight in it, because that really would be top heavy. But it was sort of quite funny to just see it crumple very quickly and easily and just get bent around and stuff. Yeah.
It was interesting to see later in the episode as well, the team talking about the fight and kind of going, well, we made a lot of questionable choices because we wanted to have this aesthetic. And they kind of stood there going, this is what we expected. But I just feel like there's a tinge of, we did think the weapon would work at least. I feel like there is a tinge of disappointment in with it, where they knew that they were at least building something that could have some power. And they haven't had a chance to show it yet. Yeah,
everything about that robot is aesthetic, but then that weapon should be able to deliver a big blow. I mean, when they were sort of hyping this battle up a little bit, I think part of what made me worried, part of what made me think that Battle Royale could win is because they do have that huge bar spinner. So it's sort of like they've got the potential in that robot to win this fight for sure. It's just a shame that once again didn't spin up.
And Hypershock did take some superficial armour damage, presumably from the bar. Unless it was just where they were riding up over it. At least Hypershock has a win now. There's a chance of them making the 16.
Yeah. Shall we move along?
We shall, and I've just realised what's coming.
We have Witch Doctor versus Blacksmith.
So Blacksmith has come out, instead of the wedge option, they've got the hinged forks on, which once again have looked ridiculously effective.
Witch Doctor's feeder wedge was not doing very well at any point in this fight, was it? It's definitely not low enough.
The thing is, it's really hard to make a full-width wedge that reliably scrapes the floor, whereas what Blacksmith's got is two really small points of contact with the floor that are hinged in such a way they're always going to be running on the floor. And that's kind of bitten them at one point where they've got stuck in the kill saw holes like Lockjaw did. But that is a very reliable way of winning the ground clearance battle.
Yeah, and win they did.
Not that it did that much for them.
Well, I mean, the thing is, it's almost like they I feel like they won that fight without the forks on the front, because it's like, oh, I just did it.
Yes!
Oh. I can't tell you how disappointed I am in myself.
Just going to make sure we get the audio of this. A little mic drop for you there.
I mean, I could edit that out.
I mean, it just depends on how honest a person you are, really, doesn't it? Whether you feel the need to censor your own mistakes but leave mine in. I mean, I'm fine whatever decision. I trust you as an editor. I just hope you wouldn't abuse that trust, you know? It's what both friendships and this professional relationship are about. It's about trust.
Oh. I don't even know how I can carry on. No, right, I want to finish my point, though. So Blacksmith didn't need the fork on the front to win that ground clearance war, because even when Witch Doctor did get around the side, they were still winning. Like, Witch Doctor that feeder wedge still wasn't doing its job. Like, Witch Doctor never got a really solid hit with their drum.
What the forks were doing, really, was lining Witch Doctor up for some hammer blows, which Blacksmith then chose not to take. Presumably because it involved throwing their weapon into Witch Doctor's weapon, which tactically is an error.
It's not ideal if it goes to a judge's decision, is it? And it almost certainly will do if you're not going to...
It would be a tactical error to just get your hammerhead knocked off first time. But also, in terms of judges' decisions, it's not helpful to not be using it.
Well, they can't win in that because, yeah, it's sort of like they can't use it because they might lose it. But if they don't use it, then it's almost guaranteed to go to a judge's decision, and then they're going to lose for not having aggression or damage points.
Well, they nearly got the win without the hammer, using the arena.
They did. And then the screws changed direction.
Yes.
This miraculous sort of move that Witch Doctor somehow did to get itself off the screws was not miraculous in any way. The screws went in reverse and pushed Witch Doctor off. Had they not done that, Witch Doctor would stuck there forever.
So it turns out they've actually been doing this all season.
Yeah, I was watching quite closely in the rest of this fight, in the rest of this what little episode there is left. I was watching quite close, and it did happen in the next fight as well. And yeah, I'm sort of willing to believe this happens in many other places. So yeah, it's not as controversial as perhaps it could have been, but it did make me laugh.
It's just that this is the first time we've seen it while there was a countdown in action, and the robot that was stuck wasn't even trying to get off anymore.
Yeah.
It's interesting because apparently it's a measure to stop the motors that run the screws getting damaged when they stall. So if they detect that they are stalled, they reverse. That's fine. I would question why you don't just have they sense that they detect that they are stalled and they stop. I feel like they like the reversing because it means fewer fights are going to end with the robot stuck on the screws. I don't think they want the screws to be a fight-ending feature. I
mean, given how long Witch Doctor was stuck up there, wedged in the screws, I have to feel like that was not like an automated system that reverses that, because they were up there for ages before they reversed, and then in the next fight with Bronco and Lockjaw, Lockjaw were on that for a lot less before they reversed. So I feel like they are human controlled.
Again, I think we discussed this really briefly before. My understanding is that because BattleBots is a competition, they can't have a human controlling those hazards. Maybe a lack of prize money this season would mean that wasn't an issue anymore, but my understanding is that they're computer controlled. You know, it's automated systems. Because otherwise it would be easy for bias to creep in or accusations of bias to be made stupidly. Because, I mean, no one would do that, especially not on Reddit. No one would make wild accusations of bias based on nothing but their own bias. That's crazy talk. But if you have automated systems, you're more insulated from that. Which is why Asimo is actually going to be taking over as judge.
Asimo's going to come and do this podcast for us.
World exclusive.
And then we can't be accused of being biased.
I'm biased towards the truth.
Are you? Unless that truth is that Jellyfish is a bad robot, or Craig Dandy can't build a good robot, or many other things that you stand by for no good reason. That
may be your truth, but it's not everyone else's truth. Anything else to say about that one?
No, judges gave it to Witch Doctor in sort of like with the greater context of the screws. That makes sense. At the time I watched it, where I hadn't sort of noticed the screws going both directions in other places, I did feel like Blacksmith were a bit robbed by the screws reversing, but it's consistent across other fights, so I'm fine with it.
Witch Doctor had the damage. They had the aggression because Blacksmith's weapon, again, wasn't really working. It was working backwards, which is something, but it wasn't really working and they weren't using it anyway. Actually, that's a point. I'm fairly certain Blacksmith came in for this fight without the flames on the hammer. They didn't showboat with them, which they would have if they were there, and it didn't look like the hammer shaft had the shielding for the fuel lines. Which made me think the fuel lines just weren't in there at all.
It's that weight-saving thing to get their things on the front of the robot.
I would imagine that the wedge is heavier and they run that with the flames. And let's face it, how much weight can the flame system really be? It's going to be a butane bottle, a valve, whatever they use as a pilot light, and a bit of tubing.
I wonder if they sort of had... I wonder if then the fork on the front was to... I mean, that's so annoying. I wonder if those wedgelets on the front were part of a weight saving measure, and then removing the flames was part of a weight saving measure to put more armor on there, because you would sort of think, you would expect going against Witch Doctor that you're going to need a bit more armor against their weapon, and I wonder if that's what they did and it just sort of wasn't mentioned in commentary.
It's a possibility. I don't think it's very likely, but it's a possibility. I can't rule it out.
Yeah.
Lockjaw versus Bronco.
Let's finish on a high, shall we?
Is it a disappointing main event? Is this a disappointing main event?
Yes. I think so.
We've got some moments out of it. We've got a couple of really good Bronco flips out of it.
Yeah, but like one or two good flips does not a good fight make. And the rest of this fight was two robots that should do quite well, both showing extreme problems moving even, let alone firing their weapons. It's just sort of... It was a very stilted fight, and not the most enjoyable thing in the world to watch, I don't think.
But as an English robot combat fan, I can't enjoy an episode unless it has flippers in it. It's my heritage, and I don't think you should deny me my heritage in this way.
Well...
No, it's not a good fight, objectively. It just had at least something going for it. You know, the fact that we've had Lockjaw being sent probably 2/3 to 3/4 of the way up the wall and then landing back on Bronco, that's a moment worth having.
It was, you're right, there are good moments, but I mean, overall, a bit of a meh fight. I just want to know what was up with the mobility. Why were neither of them working?
So I think I saw very briefly from a couple of Reddit posts the Bronco team confirming they thought it was some kind of interference that was a problem for them. Lockjaw, however, it looked like there was something physically wrong. It looked like the whole thing was kind of wobbling around a bit, as if the weapon section wasn't properly attached, or there was some issue with drive on one side.
Did Lockjaw's weapon hit the ground at some point as well?
Yes. So to me, it was either the left side sort of drive section was loose somehow, or the weapon section was dropping somehow. Because it is technically a modular bot. They do still have the gripper lifter that is the proper weapon that should be on there.
Yeah. Would that have been a better weapon choice for this fight, do you reckon?
Tactically, no, but it would have been a more entertaining fight with it.
Because you sort of have to think, looking at that, you think Bronco's anti-spinner stuff, I think it is quite effective. And I would think that, you know, maybe you sort of have to go with, well, Bronco have got that on there. We're very unlikely to get a good hit on them, so let's do something else, maybe? I don't know.
But how confident are you of winning a ground clearance battle against Bronco?
This is true. But I mean, I don't know. Like, Lockjaw gets pretty low to the ground, I think, as well, so... They might do it.
I mean, it's an interesting fight either way. You've got an invertible spinner going up against a really durable flipper, so it promised a lot anyway from that, and it hasn't delivered either way. I have, however, learned that Bronco should be one of your favourite teams, because I noticed there was ear protection going on.
Oh yeah, and when I sort of saw that again, it occurs to me they always have that one guy anyway always has like big ear protection. So yeah, big thumbs up. It's kind of his look. When I picture him, he's always got the earmuffs on.
He sleeps in them. He showers in them.
But yeah, thumbs up. Ear protection, good. More teams should do it, and more teams should all do it as well, rather than just like one member of their team doing it and no one else doing it.
It must slightly hinder your communication as a team, though.
Yeah, you can get earplugs, and I need to find them again because I want a pair. But I'm pretty sure you can get earplugs that sort of are designed in a way they've got like a sort of like a hole, I guess, through them that is shaped in such a way that it lets the frequencies that like commonly like human voices through quite well, but it attenuates everything else.
Yeah, you can get them in a range of frequencies as well. So some that you would use specifically for a concert, say, that would kind of be stopping out a lot of the bass and a lot of the very high tones and keeping the middle. You can get them, for people that work with sort of industrial machinery of certain frequency as well. There's a lot of different stuff you can get.
So I feel like, you could, if you wanted to, get ear protection that tunes out most of the crazy loud noise that's presumably in the battle box, but not tuning out the voices of the teammates right next to you quite as much. But I don't know. Any protection is good, though.
There's a much better answer. Pilots' headsets.
That would be great.
Just fully mic'd up communication between a whole team. Plus, it's an outfit at that point, isn't it? Just come in with an aviation-themed robot.
Yeah. Oh, man, yeah.
In fact, maybe Sonowa actually could do it. They've already built a helicopter.
Need a British team to do a Spitfire-themed robot.
I have a feeling that is a thing somewhere, and I can't place it.
It must be a thing. There's no way I'm the first person to come up with this idea.
I mean, Typhoon 2 was air cadets, so that was kind of a thing.
Yeah. You could do like a robot like Icewave with an actual motor in it, because obviously Spitfire is a very distinctive sound from its engine. If you could sort of just have a proper petrol engine in a robot.
Big old Rolls-Royce engine.
Yeah. Maybe take like one cylinder from a Rolls-Royce engine and use it.
A 2-stroke Rolls-Royce engine.
It might happen. But obviously you're not going to fit the, what was it, like a V12 or whatever crazy, it wasn't a V anything, was it? It was circular, but whatever crazy engine Rolls built for the Spitfire, fit that in a robot.
Or have an electric motor and a big-ass speaker. Just play the sound anyway.
Yeah. There was a car. Someone has built a car around one of those engines. I think I saw on Top Gear at some point.
Oh, the old tank car.
No, I think it's like a proper, like, maybe, I'm trying to remember. I don't know. I remember seeing this car on Top Gear, and it looked like kind of like an old-fashioned styled, normal-looking car, not the tank car, but obviously it had just an enormous front end. You're driving basically the back of the car because it's got this enormous Rolls-Royce engine from a Spitfire in the front of it.
Yes, I've just found it now. It's an old Merlin V12. The Brutus Bomber.
Yeah, that's it, yeah. Oh, man.
That is pretty cool. Robots. There's nothing left to say about this fight, is there, really?
No, I just think it's a boring fight, I think.
The one positive for me is that we've seen Bronco take damage to the flipper and still get flips in.
Yeah.
Because I want Bronco to do well. So seeing that they have that ability makes me happy.
Nice.
I think we're done. And now, with the outro, it's the one, the only, Sam!
You can find the show notes for this episode at spinnerproof.com/episodes/34. And there you can find links to all the robots we've been talking about today. You can also find a link to our Twitter at Spinnerproof, where you can tweet to us your favourite fork. I'm partial to a GitHub fork, personally.
Ladies and gentlemen, give it up one last time for Sam. Yay.
Woo!
Get off the stage.